Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Operating with Positive Impact. My name is Aline, and I'm a sustainability consultant at PwC Belgium. Today, we invited Marisa Drew. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Standard Chartered Bank. Welcome to our podcast, Marisa. Today, we want to talk a bit about sustainable finance, about how Standard Chartered Bank, his vision on sustainability, and how practicalities are going around. So, welcome, Marisa. Let's talk a bit first about your personal journey.
Sure. So with pleasure. So I think of myself as a career investment banker. So I have been in the finance world for more than 35 years. I won't say 45 years. I don't want to age myself more than I have to, which is a long time in financial services. But I started my early career financing early stage, high growth businesses. And I actually look back now and I call those businesses at the time the industries of the future. So oftentimes when you are a junior banker in a large bank, you get the younger companies to bank. So the managing directors at the time were banking. In my world, it was the PTTs, the big telecom companies like AT&T or IBM in the US. And they would give the smaller companies to the junior bankers. So I was very early days financing cable companies and cell phone companies and all of these companies now that are huge and very, very mature. So my sustainability journey was interesting in a way, and I think it's almost preordained or it's come full circle because throughout my career, as I started to move from just financing early stage companies and grew up with them, and then I took on more and more businesses. And my last job before sustainability was running investment banking and capital markets for my former bank. And I had a fortuitous moment where my chief executive had called me into a meeting and began to describe a vision that he had for the future of banking. And he said, there's a very strategic business that's linking purpose and profit, and you should run it. And I had no idea what he was talking about at the time. It came very much out of what we call left field.
And how long is that ago then?
That was in 2017.
Okay.
And at the time, sustainability and even the role of a chief sustainability officer hadn't even really been created. So it was a bit of a vision without a lot of substance. And he challenged me to go away and think about the topic. And the more research I did, the more and more convinced I became that this really was the way of the future. And this was going to be transformational on a level that we had never seen before. Now, that was 2017. I could have never conceived how big and important it was going to become. But I did have a kernel of what it was going to be. And so now I view my role in some respects as financing the industries of the future, because the only industries, in my opinion, that are going to endure are those that have sustainability at their core. You know, the old way of doing things isn't working for the world, as we very well know. And we need to think very, very differently about systems change, different kinds of businesses, lots of innovation and new technology, and a lot of transformation. So that is my day job.
Interesting. We will dive a bit deeper in those things that you just mentioned. So actually, what I hear is that you were inspired by your boss to bring in the sustainability in your job. So that's very interesting to see how that happened. Sustainability strategy, sustainable finance, but also other things like net zero things under one umbrella.
Yes.
Can you maybe elaborate a bit on all of these concepts and what it means for the banking world?
Absolutely, sure. So I am the inaugural Chief Sustainability Officer, so the first one that my bank has had. And we are a very unique bank at Standard Chartered. So we operate in 52 footprint markets with a heavy emphasis on the developing world. So emerging and frontier markets are really at our core. And that means that our client base is very different than what you might think of as traditional banks, say here in Belgium or in the West. And their needs are very different as it relates to sustainability, and their starting points are very different. So what a lot of our clients are looking for as they enter the sustainability journey is advice on best practice. What are the things that we've learned in the West that we can really apply in an appropriate and customized way in the Global South? And also they're looking for capital, because sustainability needs enormous amounts of investment. So those two things are what we bring to our client. And I often think in my role of Chief Sustainability Officer as having really two jobs. So one half of my job is everything we do with our clients. So it's the advice and it's the capital raising and so on. And then the other side of my job, or the other half of my day, is spent doing things for on behalf of my bank. So it's what we do as an organization. So I'm responsible for setting the sustainability strategy and ambition for the bank. And the way we express that ambition is in the form of public commitments. So we've made very public commitments to mobilize 300 billion of sustainable finance capital for the markets. We've also made a public commitment to get to net zero by 2050. And for a bank like ours, that's a very, very difficult challenge because we operate in all of these markets, and many of our markets, either the countries don't have a commitment to net zero or their commitments are beyond 2050. So in many cases, I think of us as needing to nudge our clients along the way toward more sustainable outcomes. And in some cases, we're operating in markets which we call frontier markets that are literally grappling with things like access to heat and electricity. We're in deep Africa and Southeast Asia, so we're not even in this discussion about what is your energy mix. It's just I want access to energy. So an extremely complex portfolio of clients, and that means that we have to be thinking very much with their needs at our heart. And so as we commit to net zero, it is thinking about how we work with our clients to get them on that transition journey. Because if our clients are going in a different direction, we won't get to net zero, because the way we think about it as a bank is through the eyes of our lending book. So when we calculate our emissions, our Scope 3 emissions, it's the emissions that we are financing for our clients.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very
So, but you're all taking that into account as well, because that's a really hard one, right?
very
The
hard.
third one,
Yeah.
Scope 3.
Yeah.
So, but I heard you talking about a kind of external part, so towards your client, and then internally
Yes.
within the firm, what you can do on a sustainability service platform. But if we go back to the client one, and you say we need to engage them, the stakeholders, and so on, to do that, what are your challenges in there? Because I assume.
Yes. Yeah. Well, challenges are many. I think the hardest one for us is really just ensuring that we meet our clients at their starting point. So what I mean by that is there are many assumptions often that we have in the West about the global South. We say things like everyone is already off coal as their primary energy source, but not in my markets. If you go to Indonesia or Africa or India or Pakistan, in many of those markets, coal is their primary source of energy. And so we can't assume that they've already moved off of these sorts of energy mixes. So, and we also have to take into deep consideration what we call a just transition. So as we are nudging our clients for the transformative business models, we have to remember that at their heart, at their core, this is all about people. And in some of our markets, we've got to build capacity for even understanding what that transition looks like. Capacity building for the new green jobs of the future. That has to go hand in hand with us providing the advice and the money to get there. So it's quite a complex journey. And the other thing is that not all markets are created equal. When people say Asia, they count Asia as one big market, but think of the difference in China or Singapore, which are middle-income, fast-growing, very, very big jurisdictions, versus a Vietnam or a Laos or Malaysia.
Yeah.
So all of these make that portfolio of complexity, that mélange of archetypes, something that we have to really be mindful of and meet our clients where they are.
So, and does that mean that you have like a different approach for all of these countries, taking into account this cultural?
Very much so. The
effect?
cultural effects, as you say, the starting points, what are the particular needs? So some of our markets, for instance, are island-bound nations. They're disproportionately affected by a lot of this storm activity that you see, and it's affecting real livelihoods. It's people's businesses can't operate any longer, or their cities are shut down, and they don't have a lot of resiliency. They don't have plan Bs.
No, indeed.
And so we need to think about them very differently than, say, a capital city, which looks very differently in terms of its financial wherewithal and its readiness to grapple with climate change and so on. So yeah, it's very much being a solutions provider, and that's got to be your mindset, and putting yourself in the shoes of the client and saying, how can I address those needs as a trusted advisor?
Okay, interesting. So you were really mentioning the people aspect.
Yes.
On the external sphere, but if we look back within the company,
Yes.
within the bank,
Yes.
how is that ESG, so also that social or people aspect reflected?
Yes. That's such a great question. So I often think of the job as a CSO. It's a job that's never really existed before. So it doesn't fit in a perfect little box. It's not mature, and every day is very, very different. But I think of the role principally as an agent of change. So if you're in a transformation business, most of the bank doesn't report to me, but I need to bring them along with our sustainability journey. And you do that through influence and hopefully capturing hearts and minds and convincing them of why sustainability should matter to them and their individual business lines. And it doesn't matter whether you're in marketing or legal or procurement or finance, sustainability is critically important, but it's expressed differently and absorbs differently depending on your roles. So within the company, we try to do quite a bit of education. So also within my area is our sustainability training and content. And once again, one size does not fit all. So we try to customize our training for our different user groups. We have 85,000 people roughly in our company. And the type of training for sustainability and the things that those people need to know if you're in the front office pitching to clients is something different than perhaps you need in the legal or marketing department. So we try to create and customize. We also try to celebrate our successes. So it gives that ability for our employees to really feel proud and engage on those places where we're making deep impact, because that's another way to influence hearts and minds. And it's also to be very open about inviting people to partner with us. We always say we want to be the best friend and the best partner of everyone in the bank, because then we can move toward embedding sustainability much more deeply within the organization.
Okay.
Because my long-term goal is almost to do myself out of a job, because if we're really, really achieving our long-term objective as sustainability is one of our core strategic pillars, pretty soon, and hopefully in the not too distant future, it will be BAU in everybody's businesses, and we don't need this little central function.
Yeah, indeed. So I was also wondering, so structure-wise of your bank, so you are the CSO. So that means that you have a sustainability department. It's not that it's horizontally reflected.
So it's a little of both. So when I first came, my organization was in its own little pod, shall we say, of CSO. It's called the CSO organization. But what we've done systematically is looked for areas where we can embed sustainability into the business.
Yeah.
So just this year, for instance, our sustainable finance origination team, we've moved their hard reporting lines into our banking and coverage area. And we did that because we wanted to make sure that it was embedding and that they were sprinkling themselves and fusing themselves across our frontline areas in a much more deep way. Because we do believe that that's also going to allow us to leverage the expertise in a more considered way. So it's all of these organizational steps are all part of that journey to ultimately having sustainability be BAU everywhere.
Okay. I'm just also wondering, because you have these programs to really motivate your employees to feel the heart and feel it, like you said. But I can imagine that there are still a lot of other people that don't care or don't feel personally attached to those topics.
Yeah.
Do you have some success stories or some ideas on how to get them?
Yeah, I think the best way to do it is being able to again put yourself in their shoes, just like we do with the clients. And why should sustainability matter to them? What's in it for them, I always say, is the best way to create that engagement and that buy-in. I think when I started in sustainability way back in 2017, and this was a very new concept, I felt like that annoying agitator, that person that kept saying, you need to pay attention to this, is really, really important, And I would say there was a fair bit of resistance, because they're saying, why are you bothering me with this stuff? What does it matter to me and my job and my clients? But through the passage of time and understanding how to present this to my internal partners, and I often say some people respond well to a carrot, right? The positive, and some people respond well to the stick, right? You better do it or else. And so in many respects, I would read my audience a little bit. So if you are a client-facing person, I might use the tactic that, boy, if you engage in this, trust me, just surface it to your clients, and you'll watch how quickly you will have a different level dialogue with your clients, because if they're ready to engage, this becomes very personal. It's not transactional, because it's really real to them. And we are in the wealth business. When you're talking about family dynamics and what a family cares about, becomes very personal. So that might capture one audience, right? That
Okay.
opportunity seizing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, for the cynics, I would say, if you don't do this, some other bank is going to do it, and you're going to lose out. You're going to look back a few years from now and wish you had gotten on the sustainability program, because you've lost business because of it. So all of these are, I would say, more tactical in terms of bringing people along. But at the end of the day, the goal is to try to find that commonality, that basis for that engagement.
Yeah. And within that idea of having those options and having the stick around it, do you think, like, to what sense is money or the balance sheets important in those
Do you mean
discussions?
money as in remuneration or incentives inside the bank, or do you mean money for clients?
I mean both, but also because if you look at sustainability, often people will come with a counter argument like,
That's more expensive.
it's too
I see.
expensive. We don't
Yeah.
go for that. Or
Yes.
something.
So that is a common challenge. Often the first starting point with a client is, what is this going to cost me? The sustainability alternative. And it is true that often sustainability does carry a cost with it. Often it's an upfront investment cost. So if we're thinking about, say, transformation, and we need one of our clients to make some capital investments in migrating their business to a more sustainable option, that requires money investment up front. But the thesis is you're making that investment to create in some cases, an infinite payback. And why I say infinite is because it's ensuring your longevity. I'm a deep believer that right now, and I can see this because the sustainability disruption that is happening to every single industry. It's not just the high carbon emitting industries, it's every industry. We have a handful of disruptors for every industry that are absolutely shaking these industries up. And I have a deep belief that they will become those industries of the future. And if you keep sticking to the old ways, there will come a moment where you'll be disrupted out of business. So this is back to expressing this in a way that clients can embrace. When you say that little bit of investment, is effectively ensuring your survival. So what is the price of that? Is that worth it? Now, of course, day to day, you make those decisions, and everybody's got a P&L to worry about if you're a client. But I think you have to have a longer term view in sustainability. It is not an immediate payback item. It is an investment like any other R&D investment. You're looking for a net present value payoff.
And so you already believe in it, but what do you think that the general meaning or like perspective is on that from investors or
investors and clients? I think of most transformational events as often having a bell curve of engagement. So typically in that bell curve, you have 5% or 10% who are very progressive early adopters. Think about any technology adoption. They talk about that curve. You will have people who will get it right away and be absolutely all in, and they will be the converts and the ambassadors and can't wait to engage. You'll have a big bubble in the middle who I call the curious and want to learn, but cautious. And so that big bubble in the middle, you do need to convince them of what's in it for them, as we discussed. And then, of course, there's always the tail that resist. I've done it this way for 100 years, and, this is something that, I don't have to worry about it. Someone else will worry about it and all that. But you've got to remind them that disruption happens often a lot faster than you think. And, I use the so screamingly obvious example of 5-6 years ago. If you said one little startup electric vehicle company could be worth more than the entire auto industry combined, would you have believed me? You said, you're crazy, right? But yet it happened. And I can give you examples and examples and examples like that. And it happened fast. And that kind of disruption is the type of thing that those who resist it often have blinders on until it hits them. And
True.
so, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So, talking about disruptions and innovations, for Standard Chartered Bank, it's very important to do innovation within sustainability. What does it actually mean, or how is it translated?
So I'm a big believer, again, especially in sustainability, we need disruption of all types. So I call it the big D disruption, or the big I innovation, which it could be a climate tech solution, which is a big breakthrough that we've never seen before. Electric vehicles or green hydrogen or carbon capture and storage, and all these new sort of technologies that are going to be great unlocks for the high carbon emitting industries. But there's a different kind of innovation that also needs to take place, which is systems change innovation. Going back to what you were saying a little earlier, the way we've done things for 50 years isn't working anymore. And we see it in every industry. We see it across our economies. We see what's happening to the planet and so on. And we really need to be innovative in rethinking how everything works, how we price financial services, how do we take factors like I'm very active in ocean conservation. Everyone thinks of the ocean as a free good that'll keep giving, but the oceans are in peril, and unless we allocate capital to ocean conservation, it'll threaten our very survival. A quarter of the world's population gets their food from the ocean. It's every second breath we take of oxygen. It's a huge carbon sequestration thing, and so on and so on. So it's thinking very differently about everything we know. So what I did at Standard Chartered was, when I arrived, as part of my strategy, I set up 4 specific innovation hubs. And those were around areas, after doing my learning journey and listening journey when I first came to the bank, really listening to our clients and our markets and our governments in our markets, and trying to understand what are the issues that they're facing. And where did Standard Chartered have a right to win, or where they were looking to us for leadership, or where we had a core competency? And I wanted to think about this in innovation terms, because a number of those areas are very early in sustainability in the ecosystem. As I say, the rule book hasn't been written yet, and we might not even have standards or a clear definition. And in order for us, and we're a bank, in order for us to think about how do we create the enabling conditions to scale capital, so bring capital, mobilize it in size, we're going to need to do some things on the innovation side. So my 4 innovation hubs are, number 1, carbon markets, because we have been very active as a bank in that space, and it's extremely complicated, but it's an important and necessary condition, my belief, in order for the world to get to net zero. But in my markets, it's really important, because in so many of my markets, some of the most beautiful capital assets, natural capital assets, exist in my countries. But there is no way to monetize that for those governments. And yet the governments don't have a lot of money. So if we could think in a careful way about creating blue carbon credits around island nations, or land credits around a gorgeous forest, and the governments can monetize those credits to help pay for conservation, it's a positive thing. So carbon markets is one.
Also, if I may, next to monetizing it, also really making sure that the projects that are done with those carbon credits are
sound
and
high integrity, and really do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
Very, very important point. I'm glad you raised it, because this is, when I said it's complicated, it's a very, very complicated space. And sometimes even the scientists don't exactly agree. And you really need to create a set of standards, and it has to be a market of high integrity, or else it won't work. And so we sit on something called the Council of the Integrity Council of the Voluntary Carbon Markets, to actually do that very thing, is to define what good looks like and create a common standard around that, and vet those and bless them, and have real understanding of what works and what isn't so rigorous. Yes. And so then my second innovation hub is all around nature finance and conservation finance. Again, 5-7 years ago, people would have said you're crazy to think that a bank for private capital at a market rate of return could do something like invest in the oceans. But we've proven them wrong by being very deliberate and thinking incredibly in that systems change way. Think differently about how to allocate capital for profit to invest in the oceans, and that will make them sustainable. But it's not just oceans. It's now biodiversity is a huge theme when we look at the biodiversity loss. How can we bring private capital to regenerative agriculture that saves biodiversity while creating crops rather than destroy it, and on and on and on.
So is it then without a commercial?
No, fully commercial. Fully commercial.
Yeah.
My belief is that there's absolutely a place for for philanthropy, and there's absolutely a place for concessionary or government money, which is often at less than market returns. But if you want to get the private sector in and create that true sustainability from a financial markets point of view, you need to create opportunities in financial products that generate a market rate of return. And that's what we work on in my innovation hubs. And sometimes, frankly, the starting point is just creating standards. A common set of standards that everybody, when we talk about this, we all know what we're saying, because if everyone's talking about something different, that doesn't allow markets to scale, and that also creates a bit of chaos. So my third innovation hub is a very new topic that we're super excited about because it's critical, is adaptation finance. So it is, again, scaling capital to the notion of adaptive and resilient business models. So this is all about the fact that we need hundreds of billions, if not trillions, of capital to flow to helping our companies and our markets and the built environment create that adaptation and resilience. And today, less than 3% of all private capital goes to that. Almost all climate finance goes to mitigation or reducing carbon emissions. But we know what's going on in the world. We see it every single day. There's another catastrophic weather activity event happening, and we need to think about how we build resiliency. So these are, this is, you can see why I get quite passionate about it, because this is innovation in real time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And my fourth one is blended finance. Blended finance is where you actually combine concessionary or less than market rate of return capital with private capital in the same project or the same structure, and you create this wonderful multiplier effect because you're bringing different types of financial participants together to really, as I say, create some magic. And this is very different than something that's ever happened before. We don't have NGOs in the same structure with banks, or oftentimes, development finance banks with private banks. And so we're saying, let's not only think differently about structures, but who comes to the table and can lend a different expertise. And then finally, running through everything is social, the S in ESG, because the E gets a lot of noise and a lot of attention. And sometimes we forget at its heart, why are we doing all this in climate? It's about people.
Yes. Okay, cool. It's very interesting, the four hubs. And I'm just wondering, how do you set up partnerships, or do you work together with communities? Like, how is this all falling into place? I assume there is a whole
stream of them. We're absolutely committed and deeply believe that partnerships are a key, because we don't have all the answers. But we often think the more people and more bright minds you get around a table, the more you can create that magic and those real breakthrough opportunities. So we collaborate all over the place. And as I say, we collaborate with very unusual participants. One of our wonderful partners in our Nature Hub is doing deals with a conservation NGO. And why do we like doing deals with them? Most people think of banks and NGOs as conflicting with each other. They have this picture in their mind that the media shows of people protesting out of
against
banks' offices and saying, why do you finance all these industries and so on? I genuinely believe that it's so many NGOs who are doing incredible work, especially in conservation. They're deep subject matter experts. I'm not a conservation expert, but what I can do is bring the capital to their conservation work. What a beautiful marriage, because most NGOs are, usually capital starved. They need money, and they spend so much of their time trying to raise money rather than doing the work. And so if we can work together, this is the type of thing that I'm saying is a very different way of systems thinking than has come in the past.
And this partnership, or that working together, is it then more on the local aspect or also globally?
All of the above. All of the above. So we work in so many different partnerships. We love also working with our clients. Oftentimes our clients are very deeply passionate about certain topics, and if we are of like mind, those partnerships can be magic. Sometimes it's very, very local. Something might surface in one of our communities or our markets, and it could be a client-led activity or government, or frankly even coming from our employees who present something to us, and we might go into partnership quite locally. Then we have big global partnerships. So perhaps a good example of that is we're part of this infrastructure called the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. And JETPs, as they're affectionately known, are where two big governments, Western governments, partner with one really big, important emerging market and banks like ourselves, all together in partnership and blended finance construct to holistically decarbonize an entire country. So we're working on one in Indonesia and in Vietnam. Now, this is, a global multi-billion-dollar type of initiative that can help to transform a country to change its energy mix from something that's high carbon emitting to renewables. So it's all flavors and sizes and shapes.
No, it's very interesting to see this like practical examples on what is actually then happening. So thank you for illustrating that. Maybe
Share another fun one.
Yeah.
Do you like one?
Yeah.
So one that we just announced last week, which was a magical, fortuitous event. Speaking of other partnerships, we are a founding sponsor of something called the Earthshot Prize, which I don't know if you are aware of this or your listeners are aware of this, but His Royal Highness Prince William, who's very, very passionate about climate change, has decided that one of his most important things he can do is to catalyze young entrepreneurs, so your generation, not mine, who have really wonderful ideas and early stage business plans, and give them, I would say, airtime on the global stage, and then help support them both financially, but also giving them all the things that they might need to make their businesses successful. And it's an incredibly robust way of vetting these businesses. They've got scientists and academics who comb through their ideas, but then they select, a handful of winners each year. We're a sponsor of that. But at last year's Earthshot Prize, you have lots of large companies who are also sponsors of Earthshot. A combination was made by the Earthshot with myself and the Chief Sustainability Officer of British Airways. And we had a conversation about working together on a carbon opportunity, which is very localized using a technology called rock weathering, where you take quarry dust and you sprinkle it on agricultural soil. And when it rains, and of course it rains a lot in the UK, it creates a very robust way for the soil to sequester carbon. And it's also really good for agriculture. So it's a low-tech solution, one that's not well known, but we use that to create carbon credits to help British Airways with their net zero ambition.
Yeah.
And then we're providing financing. So that was just announced last week. But those are the kinds of really innovative, unusual partnerships that we get quite excited about because they are big solutions.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, I think partnerships and collaboration is one of the key words in sustainability because
I'd say radical collaboration. Those are the words we like to use because it's really,
true.
very considered and very deliberate.
Yeah, radical collaboration and transformation and disruptive systems thinking. We take all those words with us. To end with maybe a personal note, like coming back to everything you learned, you have a lot of experience in sustainability in the banking world. What has been your biggest learning in this journey? What would you advise to a younger, me, for example, to take away in?
I think what's always guided me was a bit my passion. So I'm pretty much a high energy, all in person, and I need things that feed my soul in a way to be self-actualized in my career and my role. And sustainability presents such an enormous opportunity to link passion with outcomes. And so, when in my younger self, this wasn't even a glimmer of a concept back then, but I was a passionate person trying to direct my energies to where I thought I could make a difference. And that has served me incredibly well over my 35-year career. I've never been bored really for 1 minute. It is fed me intellectually and emotionally, and it's just made my career be, a wonderful journey. So if I were to look back, I would say be a little more deliberate about that. I think I got maybe lucky, but sometimes, you make your own luck by directing your passion. But I just think I probably could have saved some time if I were more thoughtful rather than, I would say a little more scattered about it.
Yeah.
But at its heart, it is, following the passion that you have. And I do believe if you can marry that with whatever your career is, whether it's sustainability or not, but you feel like the work that you do has real meaningful impact. And it could be climate impact or it could be some other type of impact. I think it just provides you with a great deal of self-satisfaction and I'd say emotional soul food, and that kind of keeps you going in the tough times, but it also lifts you, throughout your career.
Okay, great. So it's important to find that spot that makes you shine. And if we look forward, if you were able to spread one message in every boardroom, what would it be?
I would tell board directors that they really do need to engage in sustainability, understand what it means for value creation on the companies that they are serving. I think there's often varying levels of sustainability knowledge in boardrooms. But if we believe in this thesis that that sustainability is the greatest transformation that the world has ever seen, and if you engage, there's opportunity everywhere to drive value. But also, if you don't engage, it's a massive risk. I think the picture is really, really clear. But I don't know that everyone thinks that way. But that would be the message I would send to every board director.
Okay, thank you. Well, on that note, thank you for your time.
A pleasure.
And being here in our studio, Marisa. And hereby, I want to end our discussion. Please don't forget to subscribe on all our channels and hope to see you in one of the next episodes. Bye.